Some people slip the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God. Other people get stuck in the wrong stuff. I'm Matt Lewis, and if you're one of those people, welcome aboard and howdy hi ho, Guy Denton.
Howdy, hi ho, Matt. And maybe we should also add, if you're one of those people, our condolences. We hope things work out better in the future.
I want to come up with a patented opening, and I'm not sure what it is, but I think maybe we're almost there because I think, for those who don't know, the wrong stuff, at least to me, is a play on words of the right stuff, the Tom Wolfe novel, the movie. And this is the opposite of that. So that was no, you probably know the Simpsons reference to punch the face of God, but, I'm more into the Peggy Noonan, Ronald Reagan thing. So
Well, maybe we can combine the two. I mean, we wanted to work at a healthy intersection between serious analysis and wasting everyone's time with pop culture nerdery, right? So if we can find a happy medium in the opening, that should set the tone indefinitely.
Well, speaking of, we've been doing too much serious punditry. I don't want to say serious analysis because it's been ranked punditry, but
Yes,
still, we've been doing too much. So I don't know what episode are we on of the wrong stuff?
that
I
is a
don't know.
terrific question. Well, how how many episodes just in general have we recorded together? We've got to be heading toward 10, right?
Yeah, I think we're probably like we've done 7 maybe, and then we started the wrong stuff after we had done like 3. So maybe this is episode 4 or 5 of the wrong stuff. Uh, However many it is, it's not enough. There's going to be a lot
Yes.
more. There's going to be a lot more to come. But we haven't. We've just teased some stuff, and I want to go there today. I want to talk about Guy Denton. I want to find out uh, who you are, how you got here, why you hate Great Britain, why you love America, why you love the rock band Kiss, and are obsessed with professional wrestling. So if we don't cover it, and by the way, feel free to ask me questions too, but if we don't cover anything else, I will consider that a success if we
I
complete
will.
that today.
It's
My wife just popped in to say, quote, that sounds like the most repulsive thing. So we've already lost some listeners.
that's how women usually react.
We have that effect on women apparently, but let's
I
start
wonder
in the
what our
beginning.
demographics are.
Let's start in the beginning, Guy. Where in England do you come from?
So I was born in a town called Northampton, which to any American listeners who have never heard of it, I do not hold that against you in the least. It's in the Midlands region of the country, so sort of about an hour north of London, but in no sense is it north, in English terms, just sort of sitting out there in the ether, not near the beach, not too much countryside around it, just sort of a town, suburbia. But for as long as I can remember, even back when I was a young kid, I always knew that I wanted to go and live in America and become American, for largely ineffable kind of reasons that are quite difficult to point to. Um, there's the famous Peter Schramm essay that I hadn't actually read until I think I read it discovered it and read it in 2020, maybe when someone brought it to my attention, where he uses the line his father um, gave him when growing up in Hungary. We were born American, but in the wrong place. And I think you could perfectly apply that to my life, and that accurately describes me. However, I did not grow up in a wretched place or a war-torn place or anywhere like that. Um, where I grew up, my the how I always felt, I should say, is I always felt sort of inexplicably drawn to and connected to American culture, American ideas, the American way of life, American iconography, American scenery, American history, everything American, American institutions, watching them from abroad in a way I never felt about the UK. I never felt attached to the UK. I never felt attached to British culture. Never felt like I fit into it. That was sort of a passive thing when I was a kid, but then by the
What
time I
what about, I'm just gonna jump in here and there. Like, as a conservative, you've got Winston Churchill. I mean, everyone likes Winston Churchill, not just conservatives, but not everyone, but most people like. I mean, Winston Churchill, the greatest man of the 20th century, many would say. You've got Margaret Thatcher. I mean, there are things in England, obviously, to be proud of. Were you into that or no?
well, so I didn't become interested. I didn't become political, Matt, until and I would be interested in knowing when it was for you. Until when I was in the equivalent of senior year of high school, really. Um, I couldn't even have defined to you throughout most of my young life what the difference between right and left even was. So I think we talked about this a bit last time. I mean, my parents always diligent about voting and had no shortage of political opinions, but they weren't rabid political nerds or anything like that, and they were quite cynical about it. They voted Tory, but they weren't Thatcherites, and they weren't happy with the state of the party throughout. They basically haven't been throughout most of my life. Um, so thing things like th- I never really had. So when I discovered conservatism, I should say, the conservatism that I discovered conservatism as a byproduct of just wanting to learn more about American politics and the American Constitution
So
and the
what?
American.
So it wasn't like Michael Oakeshott or, dare say, Edmund Burke or something like that. It was Reagan or Bush.
Yes, yes, and the kind of symbolism and rhetoric that we would associate with that, which obviously resonated with me quite strongly because I was very gung ho about America anyway and American patriotism and ideas, even though I didn't live there. So, and
What
then,
do your I mean, what do your parents think of this? I mean, like, so my son is super into Japan. I think a lot of people are nowadays because of anime
interesting.
and the culture. Um, and we grudgingly support it. But I can't imagine when I was growing up, like if I had been like a Francophile or something, like what my parents would have thought if I was obsessed with another country. It's even if it's an ally, it's sort of is it unpatriotic? Is it frowned upon?
Um, Matt, I mean, the plural of, it's not an original line. The plural of anecdote is not data, right? So I can't speak for English people writ large. However, I can say that for all of the majority, basically everyone I knew growing up and everyone I knew in the time that I was in England, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that if you were to ask all of them, hey, you can go and live in America tomorrow, would you like to do it? 50% of them would say, no, definitely not. I'm happy here. But I think the other 50% would immediately say, yes, yes, I would love to. Please give me that opportunity. I knew a lot of people who wanted to live in Europe, a lot of people who wanted to live in Australia. I mean, it's interesting though because when you talk about this, I think it's important to define. But it's not just wanderlust. It was never. I love Europe. I've always been fascinated with Asia. I understand why someone would be fascinated with Japan or Korea or Hong Kong. I would love to try living in some of those places for a bit too. I think that would be great. But it was always a specific urge on my part to leave the UK and come here and become an American and go through the process and naturalize and become a
Yeah.
part of the creed as we describe it, right?
All right. So now I'm given to believe that if you were to marry an American, it would expedite things. It would help you out with citizenship, right? Now, we're not saying that's your only way, but am I right about that?
You are correct about that.
So
Yes.
I think it would be fun if this show were to help make that happen. So let's talk a little bit about that. What kind of person might you and if you're out there watching, we'll put out at the end of this show, Guy gives our email address, which I need to check at some point. But talk like what kind of person might win our little by the way, if you do marry Guy, we'll have you on the show. I mean, I'm just gonna say it. You can that's one fringe benefit. You can have a one guest appearance where you talk about at least one. I like maybe a weekly update on Guy, what Guy's like around the house. But I want to help find this person via the show. What's this person like?
My wife has to get something out of this deal, right, Matt? She at least has to get a plug on the air if she's gonna go through with this.
I mean, if you want a very, very minor taste of fame,
Yeah.
very minor, this is the way.
You want to know what it's like to be on the D list? Boy, do we have the platform for you. Um, I I am relatively open-minded. I mean, I don't. I I would. I like people. You know, you're the child of your parents, right, Matt? And growing up, I remember my my mother, who I have nothing but love for, and my dad too in a lot of ways, always very judgmental. And especially my mother was always very picky about the sort of people she wanted to have around and wanted to be friends with and wanted to talk to. And if someone would offend her quickly, that would be it. No chance of recovery. So I think I've inherited a degree of that, but really, not quite to the same extreme. Really, I mean, to me, what I look for in other people and what I gravitate toward in other people is just being able to have to being able to have good intelligent, you know, manners and the capacity to have kind of good intelligent conversation about a lot of different things and a broad range of, even not a broad range of knowledge, but just a broad range of interest and curiosity. That's what I tended to gravitate to throughout my life, I think.
You and I have that though, so there's
We
got to be
do.
more.
We do.
What else are
Well,
you looking?
two eyes, two eyes and decent spinal curvature. If you tick all three of those boxes, Will.
Let's say celebrity, without getting too graphic or in the weeds here, but like who's a celebrity type?
You,
Like we're looking for an archetype here.
you're really digging deep with this. Growing up, Matt, okay, I answer this and then you have to answer this. Growing up, my
I'm married,
biggest,
so I can't.
not,
I'll tell you, it's Julia Roberts.
yours was Julia Roberts.
No, I'm
Why?
just saying that because that's the celebrity my wife most resembles. Probably.
well, my
We've
big
heard,
celebrity.
she's heard two or three. There's two or three different people, but that's probably the one we've heard the most.
My big celebrity crush was Sarah Michelle Gellar and Buffy the Vampire Slayer growing up.
That's old school.
I grew up watching it because it was on TV in the UK all the time. So, but a lot
Right.
of people of my generation don't know it, which depresses me.
So let me throw this by you. This is an idea I've heard. I think it was Adam Carolla first reference. But at some point, so Sarah Michelle Gellar's got to be what, 20 years older than you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's going to come a time when you'll be a catch for her, right? That's probably not today. How old do you think she is? 45 now, maybe?
That is a great question. I'm going to Google that in real time and we can find the answer.
Let's say she's okay, find out, but let's just say, for sake of argument, she's 45.
46. You're almost bang
Okay,
on.
I'm close. Now maybe it's when she's 60 and you're 40. But at some point, and it helps if you're more successful too, but there's going to come an age when you would have a shot. And then the question is, how do we make that happen? This show could help with that if this show takes off. I'm just saying.
If we could do a Buffy-themed episode of this show, that would make all of my childhood dreams come true on so many levels, man.
I'm probably the only person in America who saw the movie at the theaters, but never saw the TV show. So
is that right? That is fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, literally, there's probably nobody else in the world who has that distinction of having actually seen the movie in the theaters, but never. I mean, I've seen it on as I flipped past it, but I've never seen an episode of the show. So
I've seen the movie, but not in a long time. Who played Buffy in the movie? I can't remember.
No recollection.
Yeah,
I saw it once.
I think someone whose career didn't quite take off in the same way. I could be wrong. Anyway, yeah. So there we go. There's that. So that's I can approve of that, Matt.
Okay. So if you're out there and you're a 46-year-old Sarah Michelle Gellar type, and you'd like to help Guy become a citizen, maybe you'd like an appearance on the show.
Yeah,
we can make that happen.
We can work with that.
Contact me or at the end of the show, email in. And I would love if there were dates. You don't have to be from DC. You can come to DC, whatever. But I'd like to. You could check in. Let us know how that. I'm willing to take this to like morning drive time radio. Is what I'm saying.
Yes. Well, the natural the natural evolution of this is Howard Stern, Matt. So we may as well get started early. You can do call-ins.
I've always said that the conservative movement, you're always on a spectrum somewhere between William F. Buckley and P.T. Barnum, but maybe it's William F. Buckley and Howard Stern. So maybe that's the spectrum.
I guess if you put Buckley and Howard Stern in a blender, the closest thing I can think of that you'd get to it is Rush Limbaugh.
Fair point.
Maybe we could improve on that in certain ways.
I do have sound effects now and clips, and I could probably find a fart clip. And we could really go morning drive time, but I won't do that.
Yes, maybe we should avoid the show sinking to quite such a low within the first 10 episodes. Once we get maybe a month or two in, then we can make the audience feel debased just for tuning into it.
All right, let's go back to the conversation. So you've always hated Great Britain. You've always loved America.
That is correct.
Not really about politics. It's more about pop culture.
I wouldn't
your parents
even
are okay. Your parents were okay with this.
Oh, well, not well. They were supportive. I mean, they weren't terribly, thrilled about their. I was an only child. They weren't terribly thrilled about their only child wanting to move across the country and not be near them. But it was never. I had very good relationships with both of my parents. It was never them I wanted to leave. It was just more or less everything else. So,
Wow.
but just quickly on that, I wouldn't even really say people always point to that pop culture. I mean, undoubtedly that would have contributed to it, but I wouldn't even really say that was the main thing that drove the obsession and the goal. It was always just sort of an inherent. It felt like that desire, that ambition was present first for whatever reason, and then the fascination with popular culture became a natural extension and an outgrowth of that. Not so much the other way around, which is even more inexplicable, I suppose. But
It's inexplicable. I think everyone loves hearing about this, and it's never satisfying. I've heard you talk about this with Jonah Goldberg. It never is quite satisfying, but I'm going to get there. I think you don't even know. I think this is going to come out during the process of a really intense interrogation over the course of the next 10 episodes. Okay, so how did you decide? How did you decide you were actually coming to America? How did that go down?
So the ambition was always there throughout my childhood. Then through the equivalent, really at the end of the equivalent of high school in England was when I realized, life is about to change. And I really don't want to stay in England when that change happens. I would really like it's time to think seriously about doing this, and I would like to do it. So I tried to apply to college in the U.S., but the school I went to just didn't really have the resources or the understanding to help me with that. And trying to do it by myself, it just was not exactly. I tried to teach myself the SAT and teach myself how to fill out the applications and everything. Wasn't really conducive.
Did you ever consider sneaking into the country illegally?
It crossed my mind. Did not go through with it, though.
Go to Mexico and walk across the border. How were you going to do it?
Well, you know what's crazy, Matt, is when I moved in the waning days of COVID, even though COVID seemed to linger on a lot longer in Washington, D.C., specifically for some reason. But throughout 2021, and this is insane to look back on, if you were in England, you could not, if you were a British citizen and you'd been in England for more than the last 2 weeks of your life, you could not legally set foot in the United States. And so, because of the travel restrictions. And so what people had to do, I know someone for a fact who did this because he got married to an American at the time, had to go to Mexico, sit in Mexico for 2 weeks, and then go into the United States, and that was legally permissible. But just flying in from England until late 2021 was not.
Because but you're way more likely to probably get COVID in Mexico. Probably,
Yes,
like,
yes.
did you have to sequester yourself, or could you go out to the barrio, to the, like, did you have to just stay in your hotel room, or could you be like hanging out?
You may have had to take. I don't remember if you had to take a COVID test if you did that, but I think you could just do whatever you wanted. It wasn't like you had
Wow.
to be isolated or anything.
I feel like
So I
Marty McFly. It's like I could spend a week in 1955, hang out. I could spend a week in Mexico. Sure.
when I was in the process of moving, I was thinking about that. Well, 2 weeks in Cancun. Having to pay for it won't be ideal, but otherwise, what's the harm? Why not?
Love it. So
But no,
you
never. For any representatives of ICE listening, no, I never attempted to
unless
illegally immigrate.
unless they look like Sarah Michelle Gellar and her
Well,
46-ish.
well,
Are you willing? To me, 46 is starting to seem like a young age. But would you be willing to? Do you have any problems with 46? Is that too
I
old?
mean, ideally, I would prefer someone around my age, Matt. But green card's a green card. So push comes to shove, I really can't be too discriminatory.
I think, yeah, you said it, not me. All right.
Someone's gonna isolate that clip, and it'll haunt me for the rest of my life. I hope you know.
So was it the dispatch? You had to get hired. How do you get a hold? Was it AEI, the dispatch? How do you get a hold of an American company and be like, okay, all those interns over there who want a job, don't hire them, hire me, and somehow I'll get there. How does that work?
We could do a whole episode just about the a whole actual serious episode just about the bureaucratic nightmare that is the legal immigration process. I mean, what I can tell you is I managed it, um, just by like a combination of luck and and persistence. Um, I went to college in England. I didn't come over here for that. I went through undergrad. I wasn't very happy with it. And I remember going into my last year. I remember going to campus on the train one day in my last year, and it just suddenly hitting me. I have to get out. I cannot do this. I did not like where it seemed like, wait, the career I was heading for after I graduated, or anything like that. And I thought, okay, I know what I want to do. I knew I wanted to work. I knew I wanted to live here, and I knew I wanted to work in the conservative movement, right? Um, and I'd known that for about 4 or 5 years at that point. So I thought, okay, what can I do to make this happen? And I remember just Googling name of organization or name of person I liked, internship, and just doing that. That was how I found out all about the sort of nerd infrastructure ecosystem that exists in Washington, which
So
I had no.
but Charlie Kirk wasn't looking for any interns, and um, you couldn't find anything with Steve Bannon, so you ended up with Jonah, right?
I didn't. I can't say I recall talking to Charlie Kirk. He may have wanted an intern. But no. So I ended up getting an internship with Jonah Goldberg at um AEI. However, I was well. What happened was I was supposed to come out to Washington to do a couple of programs and to do some work over the course of the summer of 2020. Then COVID hit. So all of that was uprooted and everything went remote. And COVID in the UK, it was bad for a time. Then it got slightly better. Then at the end of 2020 through the first half of 21, it got really, really bad in terms of the restrictions and how draconian the government mandates were. So for a
Wait,
long
was Boris Johnson the prime minister at this point? Who's prime minister?
Boris was bumbling his way through press briefings every day and making it very clear without trying to that the government had no idea what it was doing. And I remember someone I'm sure will fact check this. I would believe it was around Christmas 2020 where there was a second wave, there was a spike, a new variant or some combination, and people weren't sure what the government policy was going to be around gatherings at Christmas. And one day they came out and said, okay, we're going back into lockdown. And it was a lockdown so severe that you couldn't even legally get a haircut in England for the next several months.
That's why I grew my hair, dude.
I looked like, I probably looked like Jack Black at that time. Mine was so overgrown. But I ended up getting an internship which I was able to do because it was remote. So there was no visa finagling required. That internship was supposed to last the spring of 2021. It ended up getting extended through the summer. And then I got hired on the basis of that because an opening came up. And then that was when a lot of complicated immigration wrangling needed to occur, which I think was a nightmare for all parties involved, which we can talk about that as much or as little as you would like. But I moved over here in the beginning of 2022 after all that was resolved.
Okay, two quick questions. One, so I think most of us view England as basically just like America.
Yes.
But it sounds like from your standpoint that there's like a lot more opportunities in America, and America is like a lot freer even than Great Britain. Is that right?
I think that's entirely true. I think especially even if you just compare, so like we have a weird business, right, Matt? The strange business of conservative policy institutions and obscure conservative magazines and conservative TV stations. But even if you just take
obscure podcasts,
deeply obscure podcasts, but even if you just take that weird business, and compare it to the same weird business in the UK, the whole kind of infrastructure of think tanks, of nonprofits, for people coming out of college, for people who want to be active in the movement in some way, does not exist on any kind of comparable scale in the UK. Publishing world doesn't exist. The variety of opportunity of places to write, of ways to get involved in media, and to actually have fun with it, and not just to be stuck in a deadening news writing job, does not really exist in the UK. Part of the problem is that for a lot of young, ambitious people, intelligent people coming out of college in England who want to be on the make, want to do something corporate, or maybe want to try their hand at finding success at something a bit more creative, a lot of the time, if you want to go where the most money is and the most opportunities, and where you can maximize your opportunities, you have to go to London. And every other city in the UK would like to lay claim to being the true second city, but they're all essentially the same. And all of them, and you could say that they're all really just secondary to London. Whereas here, you have Washington, you have New York, you have Los Angeles, you have Boston, you have Chicago, you have San Francisco, and those are just the big, obvious ones.
Yeah.
You could find plenty.
Each one has an industry. DC is the political capital.
Exactly.
New York's the financial capital, and maybe fashion or something. LA is Hollywood, and so definitely there's a lot more possible places to make it big. By the way, maybe 10 years ago, I spoke to a group of French conservative young people who came to America. They come every year, and I speak to them a lot. And I was talking to them, and I was telling them my story, which I won't bore you with. But basically, I didn't really know what I wanted to do till I was about 30. I didn't know that I wanted to be a writer and all that. And my lesson was, and so the lesson is that you can reinvent yourself. And even if you don't know what you want to do today, you can always discover it. And they were like, oh, no, you don't understand. That can't happen in France.
Yeah.
And I was like stunned, showing my ignorance. But it was like, basically, at a certain age, you get put on a track, you take these tests, and they pretty much... Peggy Noonan, the great writer, the great writer, wrote some of the greatest speeches. I referenced her already once in this show.
Right.
She told me that when she was a girl, she took a test, and they told her that if she was really lucky and worked really hard, that she could be... I'm trying to think of what it was. I think it was an assistant or a typist or something like that, But in America, you don't have to do what the teachers, the system tells you. But like in other countries, maybe you kind of do, right? You can't break out of it.
I mean, no, and in England, that is very much the same way. Um, the way the education system, and I wonder how many people listening will have much familiarity with this, or if it will even be interesting to them. But here we are. The way the education system is structured in the UK is that the emphasis is on early specialization, much like I'm sure it is in France, or I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that France, Germany, other European countries, and maybe places like Japan and Korea too also operate like this. So the idea is that once you hit the equivalent of high school, you drop a handful of subjects. You go through 2 years, then you drop even more. You go through 2 years, take a bunch of exams that ultimately don't really matter very much, even though there's a lot of pressure on them at the time. And then for the last 2 years, you drop even more so that the average person will only study 3 or 4 things intensively in what are called to complete what are called A levels. Um, and you can mix and match, and there are no requirements, so you can mix and match and do anything you want. So I despised math and science, which is why I now join you in taping obscure podcasts, Matt, instead of instead of working on building submarines or rocket ships. But there was
That's the wrong stuff.
but thankfully, there was no requirement that I had to continue taking math or anything like that once I got past a certain point. So I did things like literature and then history for my last 2 years. But there was always a palpable, and then when you go to college is only 3 years, and you study one thing intensively throughout those 3 years. There's no liberal arts system. So you can go to law school through undergrad. You can go to medical school through undergrad. Um, the the challenge of that, though, I think it does have its advantages, and I think it also has some very real drawbacks. One of the challenges is that asking 15, 16-year-olds to pick the 3 or 4 subjects that they think they want to specialize in, which will in turn lead them to a degree, which will in turn shape the rest of their life, is a pretty tall order, right?
I
Because
hate that. It's un-American, I would say, happily. And I don't want us to get to that point. There's a danger that we could get to that point. I don't like that. I would have been cut out. A lot of people more successful than me would have been cut out.
and by the time and when you take exams in the last 2 years, there's a very real sense and a very real danger that if you don't perform well in those subjects, and if you don't get you know, each subject gets its individual grade, so you get 3 or 4 grades. If you don't get enough A's or a decent set of or a solid set of grades, then you aren't going to a good college. That's it. And in turn, you aren't going to go. Let's say you want to go into the private sector. If you don't go to a good college, a good law firm, a good investment bank, a good consulting firm, something like that, takes that into consideration. It probably isn't going to look at your application. So in a very real sense, the whole rest of your life and your ability to succeed in the rest of your life is dependent on not screwing up this early stage.
Yeah,
And
I'm not one of these people who hates experts and elites. I'm not into that populist game, but I'm also not into this other thing that you're describing. I think America is about reinvention and weird, idiosyncratic people being able to come out of nowhere.
yes,
Part of our success, actually, is nurturing the nuts and the weirdos, of which you've come to the right place. So
and the people listening to this show have also come to the right place
the
with you
wrong,
and I.
the wrong place in a
The
way,
wrong
the
place.
wrong stuff. We're not going to have to. We're just scratching the surface. I'm going to have to jump in a bit, but I do want to. This will be to be continued, but I do want to get into Kiss a little bit. The rock band Kiss, which you were famously obsessed with.
Infamously.
Tell me about the first time you discovered that sweet, sweet melodic sound.
Um, good lord. So this is an embarrassing story,
By the
but I
way,
may as
my first memory is a local restaurant in my hometown that had a Kiss pinball machine that had these scary dudes wearing the scary makeup. And I was a little freaked out by it. That's my kind of first memory of the band.
That pinball machine is probably now worth tens of thousands of dollars, which is an equally terrifying fact. Um, I have a memory. I should say, first of all, I am a huge music lover, Matt. We could maybe do a whole separate episode about that. But I love a great range of artists and genres, and I like to think that I know a lot about music, 20th century music, for sure.
All right.
However,
Sometime I'm going to pick up this guitar here, and I'm going to play a riff or two and see if
I
you
have
can
to
name that
guess.
tune.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe that'll be for premium listeners and Patreon supporters.
yes, they'll get that and a Starbucks gift certificate for their support.
Yeah.
But
how did you? So first time you heard Kiss?
Yes, but in spite of all that, I do have another inexplicable, incurable obsession. Is with Kiss, and I have a memory of when I was tying this into The Simpsons, as we're always able to do. I have a memory of being, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years old, and there used to be, I assume they still exist. Matt Groening, I think, used to be in charge of a comic company called Bongo Comics, which published Simpsons comics in the 90s and early 2000s, which was separate from the show. It was its own thing, and I always used to get them as a kid. I remember a lot of my friends did. And I remember one day for Halloween one year, you could probably find this online. I'm sure you can find this. To corroborate that I'm not insane, anyone listening, there was an issue that had 4 stories in it credited to, I don't know how involved they really were, but they might have been, because they do all love comics, credited to different rock stars. So Gene Simmons supposedly wrote one. I remember Alice Cooper wrote another. Rob Zombie wrote one. And there was a Kiss-themed story in this comic. And on the cover, Bart, I'm pretty sure Bart was dressed up like Kiss and in Gene Simmons' face paint. Where the story was, you may appreciate this, that Marge had spent the night with Gene after a Kiss concert in the 70s, and Gene was Bart's real father. And so one day,
Wait,
Alien.
that breaks. I told you before I interviewed Mike Reese. Is that his name?
Yes.
I interviewed him, and he told me that Homer and Marge can never cheat on each other because that breaks this unspoken contract on the show.
Yes.
So this is This is like goes against canon. I would say what you're describing right now.
A strong violation. You can get away with that by saying it's a Halloween story and out of the usual timeline, I think. Because then the idea is that on Halloween, Bart transforms into Gene Simmons and discovers he has a long tongue and can breathe fire, and then aliens attack Springfield and he has to fight them off. So
it's all sort of like a dream, effectively.
Yes. Okay. And the whole story is full of Kiss imagery and Kiss references. I have no idea why they did it or why they thought kids would understand it. But I remember that always stuck in my head because I had no idea what it was supposed to even mean, but I was intrigued by it. And then I think when I was around 13, for some reason, maybe I saw that again somewhere, or I saw Kiss in something else, and just thought offhand one day, gee, I wonder what Kiss sound like because it looks funny. This will just be funny. And I remember going on YouTube, I found Detroit Rock City, played it, and that was it. I was hooked. And over the course of that year, became completely obsessed. And I could probably write
Kiss Army.
Yes, card-carrying member.
Do you think we could start a Wrong Stuff Army?
Hopefully. If we can make it as profitable as Paul and Gene were able to make the Kiss Army, then I don't know if we want to make Wrong Stuff caskets, Matt, but maybe that'll come in a few years.
I think a Wrong Stuff pinball machine would be super cool. Now you've been to a couple of Kiss cruises where they perform on a cruise ship. Do you have any plans? And then, is anything booked yet? Because I'd love for you to be our correspondent. We could even do this from the boat, from the show, possibly.
We could.
Is this planned? Do you have anything else on the books right now?
So the tragic thing, so it's up in the air. So allegedly Kiss retired and the band Kiss is over as of December 2nd, 2023. Supposedly they played their final concert ever at Madison Square Garden. However, the four final members of the band aren't dead. They're still very much alive. They still all very much like money. So whether this is actually sincere, I have my doubts. The notion, the notion was that the Kiss cruise I went on in 2022 was going to be the last one. But they carefully worded it to say, oh, Kiss's final in-makeup performances on board. So it's an open question, and among nerds like me, there's been endless debate about whether there will be more Kiss cruises and whether they will continue. But if there is another one, it is guaranteed that I will be attending, and I will be broadcasting live from the ship and showing you some sights, Matt.
All right, we've only scratched the surface of who is Guy Denton, who is this person.
I really do have more layers.
There's a lot. It's like an onion. We've just peeled the first layer, and there's like 1,000. And we'll keep, every few episodes, we will keep peeling more layers until we get to just a nub.
Right.
Deep nub. And if you're a 46 or younger year old woman who resembles Sarah Michelle Gellar, who is a U.S. citizen, can document that, and would like to appear on an episode of The Wrong Stuff, you know what to do. Hit us up, and I think we can make it happen. I think even a date or two might qualify. You come on, report about what happened on the date, and so we'll see how that goes.
I was going to say, if nothing else, it's premium content for us, Matt. So I'm a strong advocate of this on a number of levels.
Are you okay with dating? Like, what if it's part of my fan base are now, I wouldn't say progressives, but like Joe Biden voters. Do you have any prohibitions on Democrats?
Not in the least. I don't really understand that. I never have. I get the argument that values should align. But I think values can align and political preferences can differ at the same time. Obviously, it's a benefit, but no, not at all.
Okay. All right. You know what to do. Hit us up. Hit me up on Twitter. I think Guy gives out the email at the end during the little outro, so stay around. All I have to say left is I want to rock and roll all night, party every day.
And for me, Matt, it's called gin time again.
All right. You've come to the wrong stuff.
You should
We'll see you back here.
Have a good one, everybody.
If you like what you heard here today, please make sure to follow the show, subscribe to the show, leave a like, review the show wherever you get your podcast, and also please smash that like button, or whatever the people my age are saying. I don't know. I am a Kiss fan after all. But nonetheless, you can also follow us on X at WrongStuffPod, or drop us a note. Fawning praise or scornful disdain, we accept both, at the Wrong Stuff Pod, all one word, at gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. We're looking forward to next time.